I received this health advice letter from Cancer Research. It's addressed to the woman of the house. Perhaps everything one needs to know about men's status in society is embodied in this letter. The very logo with its pink dot sets out its position. Any man donating money to Cancer Research is like a Jew donating to the Nazi Party. I've kept this letter unopened, waiting for the day that I receive a similar letter addressed to the man of the house. So far it's been 7 years.
I have cancer.
I've got breast cancer.
My wife died of cancer.
I survived breast cancer.
Please give £2 a month to Cancer Research UK, so even more women can survive breast cancer.
One figure that in a recent year that came up was that on the promotion of prostate cancer, that £47,000 was spent. Whereas if we look at the comparable figure for the try and prevent breast cancer, it was 4.4 million, which is quite a big difference.
100 times as much, and now the difference in spending is increasing. Cancer Research alone spent £45 million on breast cancer in 2008. Does it draw conclusions about the balance of healthcare in Britain?
Yeah, one of the things it shows is that there is a difference. In other words, women's health is more of a priority. I mean, I think that the feminist movement improved women's health and they didn't improve men's health. And this is in part due to the fact that men's health issues, so for example prostate cancer, have not been given the same sort of immediacy, the same sorts of priority as women's illnesses, such as breast cancer. The amount of preventative care on breast cancer is far more than the amount of preventative care on prostate cancer, for example. You take now birth control clinics, they're not at all... They're very gender specific. They're geared towards women, and they give free health care to women. Female methods of birth control, the pill, the diaphragm, they're provided free. Male methods of birth control, the condom, are not provided free. So men have to go, can't go to their doctors and get them for free. They can go to the FPA and get them from free, but still the family planning associations are not that. I don't think they cater very much for men, and if men go in there, there'll probably be one man amongst about 20 or 30 women.
It got into health. You know, you had women clinics. Now, in a society where you're talking about equality of opportunity and everything's all got to be on a par, what the hell are we playing at with women clinics? Why don't we have clinics for all people?
So you would say that men don't value their bodies in the same way?
No, I think that's right. I think that the whole of our society is geared towards thinking women's bodies are rather special, and there's not the same thing about men. I remember when I was doing studies in youth culture, I used to read the male magazines and the female magazines. If you read the male magazines, you find they had pictures of women, but if you read the female magazines, you also found pictures of women. It was only in the gay magazines that you found pictures of men. And this doesn't give very many men a positive body image, and this can affect health, I think, because if they don't think they should look good. I was talking to a young woman the other day who said, it doesn't matter. I said I was going to try and lose a bit of weight, but she said, it doesn't matter what a man looks like, it only matters what women look like. Well, if people think that, then in fact it doesn't encourage men to look after their body, to work out or whatever they need to do to keep fit.
Do you think that men and women are in competition for health funding?
Yeah, I think to a degree we are. We do see that men and women are in competition. Women tend to get it for their breast screening, where in fact it doesn't get awarded for prostate and testicular cancer, for example.
Because I could get prostate cancer, or do I have to set up my own prostate cancer awareness month and then we're in competition? Breast cancer awareness month. I mean, why not Cancer Awareness Month? Why Breast Cancer Awareness Month? So again, you've got this dividing it all up business. So if you've got prostate cancer, well, you can go and hang yourself, you know. So we have a situation again where my wife regularly goes in for breast cancer screening and that sort of thing. I don't get any screening at all. And yet I hear all the time of people in the family or even guests that normally come, oh, he got prostate cancer, it was too late, he's dead.
I walked all the way along here in the middle of the night wearing a jewel-encrusted bra.
Last year we raised 4 million, and I hope that this year we're going to raise a lot more. And it's just beautiful to see all these gorgeous women that are out in the park just sitting there waiting to do their bit for breast cancer.
Men are not allowed to run in these races because, as the website spells out, as we've seen before, just replace women with any other group. And the hatred becomes clear. Do you think healthcare provision is equal for both sexes in London and maybe in the UK in general?
I don't think it is, actually. I think there is a lot of focus on women and women's health, again from the point of view to traditional screening programmes, and also that because they are the carers, main carers of children. And those are two very powerful reasons why a lot of healthcare resource has been put into looking at women exclusively, almost. Men still don't seem to have as much focus or interest on their the conditions which affect them. So, for instance, prostate cancer, which is a very important health issue for men, has not had as much input into it as, say, cervical or breast cancer has for women. That's the impression I get. We have certainly been given guidelines and also literature on testing for PSA and so on with regard to prostate cancer, but I get the impression there isn't as much resource, if you like, put into the specific issue of male health. We should be looking out for things that specifically affect men, such as testicular examination, such as sexual health, other sexual health matters, and also there is the question of mental health issues in men. I think shouldn't be so reluctant, perhaps, to come forward.
In particular, young men who the suicide rates have risen for, sort of more significantly than you would have expected over the last 20 years.
It's actually more than the last 20 years. The sustained increase in male suicides has been apparent since 1970, whereas female suicides have decreased over the same time.
There's a perception of men as being stronger and more able to deal with things, whereas it's more natural for women to express their feelings and to be the ones that say, I can't cope, I need help. Whereas in our society today, still very much there is this, men are supposed to be the strong, silent ones who can cope and just carry on, and it's difficult to get beyond that, and to perhaps say, no, I do need help,
The medical specialisation of gynecology is a standard part of the medical landscape, but even the word andrology is not known by many people. St Bart's Hospital in London has a breast cancer wing, but it doesn't have a testicular cancer or a prostate cancer wing.
Breast cancer is very much, as is testicular cancer, very much a disease where if you pick it up early, you've got a much better chance of cure.
The extreme selfishness of women and society's willingness to support it is truly astonishing. Why do we have mobile breast cancer screening units and not mobile testicular cancer screening units?
That's a very good question. I do take your point about testicular cancer screening, and as far as I can recall, the only real public promotion of that was when Richard and Judy did their televised, this is how you examine your testicles, and that was daytime TV, as I recall, wasn't primetime TV. Really, there isn't a hell of a lot of publicity about it. It's a very easy thing to do as well.
It's easier and cheaper to do a testicular exam compared with a cervical cancer exam. So why is cervical cancer screened and testicular cancer not?
I mean, I'd like to see sort of like, just so they have breast cancer things going around, screening things. I think maybe we should do the similar things with prostate cancer, you know, so that both the sexes, maybe both at the same time, you know, they save the price of the vans, you know, and you could get the men to go along there, and they're more likely to go if they've then, you know, and do it at the workplace as well. That's another thing that could be helpful. So all the guys would go along and get their prostate checked, for example, or something similar.
At what age were you shown how to do a testicular exam, an examination of your testicles for any cancerous lumps or any abnormalities?
If I was shown that, I can't remember. So no, if I was, I can't remember it.
When's the last time you did an exam of yourself?
I have no recollection.
And do you think that most men know how to examine themselves for testicular cancer in the same way that women know how to examine themselves for breast cancer?
No, I don't think that most men know how to examine themselves for testicular cancer. And I have to admit, I certainly don't have a systematic kind of program of examining myself for testicular cancer.
Why do you think that is?
Reflecting on that, again, it may be a gender difference in that men aren't as concerned about things like their health in terms of testicular cancer.
When did you last do a test, an exam of yourself?
Don't know, man. Don't really think of it.
You're not worried about it?
No. I'd be feeling my gonads every day, man.
Check herself
for
breast exams.
Oh yeah.
Does she do that at a certain regularity?
I would imagine so. I mean, she doesn't tell me about it, but yeah, she does. I think she does it sort of, you know, in the bath and stuff.
So do you think you test yourself as often as she tests herself?
No way, no. No, not at all. No. I'm not saying I never do it, but you just don't think of it, do you? You don't really think of it.
I can give you an idea from a typical surgery list. This afternoon I'm seeing 16 patients, of which 10 are women.
And is that typical, would you say?
I think that's fairly typical. It's about 60 to 70% or so of the patients, or even more, who attend are women. I'm not convinced yet that men are as interested, if you like, in their own health as women are. They tend to come more on a reactive basis when they have something wrong with them or causing them some anxiety, whereas women, I think, have, because of the history of screening, for instance, in primary care, where we, for many years, have screened for cervical cancer and breast cancer with mammography. If a patient comes to you for a cervical smear, for instance, they will often mention to the nurse some other issue, such as, oh, well, that mole has been there for a long time, I think it's changing, something like that. They're actually there in a situation where obviously they're having something done to them, but they can also use that for other things as well. Whereas men traditionally haven't had that opportunity.
I suddenly realised that with prostate cancer, for instance, that up to about 4 or 5 years ago they were spending several £1 million on breast cancer development and £43,000 on prostate cancer. When I wanted to go and get a PSA blood test to see if I had prostate cancer as a screening exercise, I was actually told that no, the health minister says men cannot have that PSA blood test.
We've decided not to screen, and that puts people like me into a difficult position when a man comes in to say, I'd like a PSA done, which is the test for prostate cancer as a blood test.
A California cancer surgeon successfully campaigned for a special postage stamp that has raised $50 million to fight breast cancer, a disease he cuts out of dozens of women's bodies each year. But he's been unable to win a similar stamp for prostate cancer. Ironic, considering he now suffers from prostate cancer himself. The government and countless charities spend taxpayer money informing women of their health needs, and then spends more money improving their health. In the case of men, the government spends no money informing men of their health needs, and men's charities barely exist.
They have been brought up not to consider themselves. I think men are brought up to consider other people first and foremost. And It's also the case that a vast amount of funding has been poured by the government into educating women about their health needs, but very little has been put into those needs for men. In fact, a few years ago, I think it must be about 6 years ago now, when I was at my local GP surgery, I was sitting in front of one of those revolving displays with information booklets, and I promise you, without exaggeration, I don't exaggerate, 6 of them were to do with matters relating to men and women's health. 14 of them were exclusively to do with matters to do with women's health. There was not a single booklet that was exclusive to any topic to do with male's health. It was also admitted by the health minister 4 years ago that 8 times as much money was spent on women's health issues than on men's health issues. 8 times as much. So the situation is that men have been trained, firstly, not to look at their own needs first, and also they've been ignored. They haven't been alerted to the medical problems that they are likely to face. And that's been down to the government and the influence of the feminist movement. It's also the case that there's no minister for men. There is a minister for women, and the job of that ministry is to look after the interests of women, to investigate every piece of legislation to see how it affects women, and to ensure that no piece of legislation adversely affects women. But there is no scrutiny by government to see how any legislation adversely affects men. There's simply no department.
It's funny, isn't it? We've got a ministry for women, haven't we? But we haven't got one for men. Now, why is that when women live longer? And this actually shows the fact that women have kicked up. In fact, I was talking to a guy in America, and he said, well, men live an average of 6 years less than women. Now, if it's the other way around, if women live 6 years less than men, the feminists would be kicking and screaming and shouting, and men just seem to accept it. And I think he's right.
So, for example, when you have a politician who is typically standing before you arguing for some particular policy, he's usually arguing on behalf of his party, his political party, or perhaps on behalf of his country. But I'll bet you've never seen a politician in your life standing up and arguing for the cause of men. I've never seen it. I've seen them talking about women, but the psychology of men, if you like, has been hidden. His party would not benefit by creating a minister for men. They purposely see no need for one. But that's going to change.
It could also be the case maybe that would cause more problems than it would solve by highlighting so many, yes.
Well, I think yes. I think you hit it right on the head there, that they're too scared of what will be discovered. Absolutely.
100% whole grain. Women who have healthy hearts tend to eat more whole grain foods. Never too late, Mum. Never too late.
Fitness is really, really low in fat, so it really can help me keep my shape.
With these cereal adverts, we've gone to the next level of misandry in advertising. Now we don't even pretend to be interested in men's health. Government is now providing further funding to allow doctor surgeries to open later. This is due to the increase in the numbers of women who are now in the workplace and who therefore cannot attend surgery. However, there was no funding to open later when it was only men affected by doctors' hours. A similar situation exists with health and safety laws at work. These began to be introduced as women started to enter the workplace. Before women came in, health and safety laws didn't exist. Ironically for women, the lack of interest that society has in male health can impact on their own well-being as well as men's.
I find there are a lot of young black men who present with psychosis without having gone through the primary care system. That is, they allow mental illness to progress to a certain extent where it's very severe. I'd like to see that present earlier, so perhaps we could prevent it from getting to that level.
Psychosis can lead to violence, and this is often what lies behind those incidents of domestic violence where a man is at fault.
Women are far more likely to go to doctors and seek help for depression, and I think be put on tablets, prescription tablets. I think men are more likely to go to the pub and if they, for example, a relationship is broken up and get drunk. And this is possibly okay for some of them, but I think can have adverse effects. Also, we know that suicide rate for men is around 4 times that of women. Now, this suggests that men are, if, say, a relationship breaks up, men are more likely to be isolated. They might lose contact with their children. They may lose their home, to a greater degree than women. I think that they do suffer in this way. But even at the younger ages, men are more likely to commit suicide.
But in news stories about suicide, the fact that men suffer more is ignored. The word men is simply not mentioned.
Illegal drugs is more common. It seems to be more common amongst men, and they do have greater problems this way. And I think this is because they don't go to doctors. I think that if they went to doctors, they maybe would put on Valium or something medical, and then but they won't do that because that's not sort of the way they go, and they wouldn't like to go to a doctor, admit they were depressed in a way in which I don't think a woman would mind so much.
Substance abuse, definitely there's a correlation between that and suicidal behaviour. There's obviously increasing research to sort of suggest that I think soft drugs like cannabis can cause sort of mental health issues, which are a strong pointer towards someone displaying suicidal behaviour. Another one is alcohol. Alcohol is a really, really strong predictor of suicidal behaviour.
These kind of drugs for depression are more the sort of got a feminine type attitude towards it. In other words, I think the medical profession is more willing to think of women as needing these things, whereas I think that men would therefore take more illegal drugs or be taking drinks, as we said before, and so they do have greater problems.
At the time of this interview, the Samaritans made little or no mention on their website or advertising of the scale of male suicides, more than 3 times that of women. This information was instead buried deep in a written report. You couldn't make this stuff up. It's not more men, it's over 3 times more men. If you were 11 years old and wrote an abysmal sentence like that in a school homework assignment, you'd be marked down, in red pen no less, for not stressing the major point. I asked if the charity had any plans to start focusing help on those who are so obviously at highest risk, men.
Now, because young men are at such a high risk of suicide, it's likely that the activities that we carry out will have a gender bias and that we will look to target the high-risk groups more specifically, and young men as a part of that. For example, in jobs which are kind of predominantly carried out by young men who are unskilled, like say the communications workers union is a really good example, or the construction trade, you might look at specifically targeting that audience and saying, did you know that this is an issue? And raising awareness of it and trying to educate them about the fact that, hey, it's okay to seek help. These are some of the things you might watch out for amongst your mates. Don't be embarrassed about it. It's a natural part of life, and the more that you can be there for other people, or the more that you can be cool with not, with asking for help when you need it, the less likely it is that you'll end up, dead, basically.
Or perhaps deny that they have a different attitude or outlook about their health, denying that it's ever going to happen to them. I don't know. You'd have to ask somebody who, again, a medical sociologist about that.
Women take more care of their health because they tend to go to doctors, to get used to it. They go for maybe birth control, or they maybe go when they're going to have babies. So they're far more likely to see it as a natural thing to do. Whereas I think a lot of men are rather macho. And one of the American commentators said that when men are in their 20s, they're too fit and too strong to go to doctors. When they're in their 30s, they're too busy to go to doctors, and when they're in their 40s, they're too scared to go to doctors. So this is why they didn't really go.
I think it's up to people who decide on strategy and funding at senior levels in the NHS and government, who need to look at things, I think, a bit more dispassionately.
If men had the same level of healthcare as women, how many lives could be saved? Is it as simple as that?
Well, I think that I think we could maybe add a couple of years to men's health if they took more care. the same career as women, at least 2 years, and maybe 3 years in the longer term.
Why are we not striving for those few extra years for men? For sons, brothers, fathers, grandfathers and friends? How about these headlines?
There ought to be more representation of men's health on strategic bodies, not only local, regional, at governmental levels, which look at overall strategy with regard to that specific issue, whether there is enough equality in health provision and also resource being put into men's health.
The only things that men dominate in Western society are the figures for heart attacks, homelessness, workplace deaths, and suicides. Like so many of the slogans invented by feminism, the term male-dominated is a myth and always has been.